Hello, YouTube, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have two articles in this episode for you. Both these URLs are in the description of the video in case you want to do your own research on them. And I'm waiting to make sure that we have some audio going here. And it's taking its dear sweet time. Little hamster running in the wheel. Always like to check that audio out before I get going, make sure, and that way I don't have to redo a show from talking to myself. There, it looks like it's working just dandy. Okay, the first article that I have for you is off of abcnews.go.com, and it says, the latest, police, about 20 fires set at the Dakota Access Camp. The latest on plans to close a protest encampment near the Dakota Access Pipeline construction site in North Dakota, and all these times are local to Dakota, 6 p.m. Well, I'll tell you what, it runs backwards here in time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bottom and start up with this. And that way we'll get it all in chronological order. 12:16 a.m. The Army Corps of Engineers plan to close the Dakota Access Pipeline protest camp isn't likely to end on the ground opposition in North Dakota. It also may not spell the end of the heavy law enforcement presence near where the Dallas-based developer is finishing the last big section of pipe. When completed, the pipeline will carry oil from North Dakota through the Dakotas and Iowa to a shipping point in Illinois. The protest camp has been around since August and at times housed thousands of people. The Corps has told the few hundred who remain that they must leave by 2 p.m. on Wednesday. The Corps says it's concerned about potential flooding as snow melts. Protest leaders Phyllis Young say many will just go to new camp on private land. At 6:30 a.m., authorities in North Dakota are offering assistance and services to Dakota Access Pipeline protesters as they close a long-standing encampment near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. Up to 300 people remain at the camp, down from thousands at the protest peak. As Army Corps of Engineers has ordered the camp closed at 2 p.m. Wednesday, citing the dangers of impending spring floods, North Dakota state officials have set up a travel assistance center. They are offering personal kits, water and snacks, health assessment, bus fare for protesters to travel home, and food and hotel vouchers. They are planning to start buses from the camp to Bismarck at 9 a.m., but law enforcement officials say they expect some protesters won't leave without being arrested. At 8:30 a.m., Dakota Access Pipeline protesters are ceremonially burning some of their living structures ahead of the closure of a long-standing camp in North Dakota. About 200 to 300 protesters remain at the camp near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. The Army Corps of Engineers has ordered the camp closed at 2 p.m. Wednesday, citing the potential for spring flooding. Those left in camp milled about peacefully Wednesday, many in prayer. At least 4 wooden structures were being burned in what protesters say is part of leaving. Nestor Silva of California says he is planning to move to a nearby camp being set up on land leased by the Cheyenne River Sioux. Law enforcement say they expect to make some arrests, but Silva says he doesn't expect any trouble. At 9:50 a.m., cleanup efforts at the Dakota Access Pipeline protest camp are on hold after negotiations broke down and camp leaders. Crews have been working to tidy up the camp since January. Contractors were brought in last week to boost those efforts because authorities feared the onset of spring flooding at the camp near the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. North Dakota Highway Patrol Lieutenant Tom Iverson says the delay Wednesday is unfortunate since time is running out. Camp Wellness Director Johnny Azarin says it's too muddy for trucks and other heavy equipment following winter and rains and winter rain and snow. There we go. Camp officials also took issue with plans by authorities to have armed police escort the equipment to the camp. The Army Corps of Engineers has ordered the camp closed by 2 p.m. on Wednesday. At 12:30 p.m., about 20 people say they aren't leaving the Dakota Access Pipeline protest camp and are willing to get arrested. 50-year-old Charles Whalen of Mealy Lacs, Minnesota, says the group plans to offer passive resistance should law enforcement choose to enforce a 2 p.m. Wednesday departure deadline set by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Whalen says the group is not going to do anything negative. Whalen, who is of Hunkpapa and Oglala descent, says he's encouraged by the protest effort and believes it will open discussions on treaty rights. Another camper, Matthew Bishop of Ketchikan, Alaska, was tying down his possessions on the top of his car and preparing to move to the new camp in the area. He says protesters plan to regroup and see what we can do. At 1 p.m., it says about 150 protesters are marching arm in arm out of the Dakota Access Pipeline protest camp while singing and playing drums. They leave behind the smoldering remains of structures that were burned as part of a ceremony. The campers were heading down a highway near the camp, but it's unclear where they're going. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers set a deadline of 2 p.m. Wednesday for protesters to clear the area. Several of the marchers carried signs. One man carried an American flag hung upside down. At 1:20 p.m., authorities say one person has been burned in fire set by protesters as a long-standing encampment near the Dakota Access Pipeline is shut down in North Dakota. Cecily Fong, a spokeswoman for the State Department of Emergency Services, says the extent of the unidentified female's injuries weren't known. Fong said an ambulance was being sent to the encampment. Most of the 200 to 300 protesters who remain at the encampment walked out around 1 p.m. That was about an hour ahead of the deadline set by the Corps of Engineers for the camp to close ahead of a spring flooding threat. It wasn't known where the protesters were headed, but authorities had several buses ready to carry them to Bismarck for food, lodging, and help getting home. Some protesters had vowed to camp elsewhere on private land. And at 2 p.m., a large group of protesters who were camped out at the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline were exchanging hugs and goodbyes after marching out of the camp ahead of a departure deadline set by the federal government. Many of them cried. The group sang songs and prayed as they walked and over a bridge atop the Cannonball River. On 2 occasions, they had to clear the road to make room for ambulances. A bus from the United Tribes Technical College in Bismarck, along with 4 vans and a truck towing a trailer from the Standing Rock Episcopal Church, were waiting to transport the protesters. The state arranged for the campers to a transition center in Bismarck. Raymond Kingfisher, a protester from Seattle, was one of the leaders of the march. He called it a difficult and emotional day. He ended the parade by saying, "We go in peace, but this fight is not over." At 2:15 p.m., some of the remaining protesters at the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline camp have set fire to a building that was serving as the main entrance to the area. North Dakota Indian Affairs Director Scott Davis says protesters also have strung barbed wire across the opening to the encampment. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers set a Wednesday for protesters to leave the camp that's on federal land near Standing Rock Indian Reservation. At least 150 people marched out of camp ahead of the deadline, but others have said they don't plan to leave on their own. Nathan Phillips, a member of the Omaha tribe in Nebraska, said he planned to move to another camp that's on private land. He says he has been in North Dakota since Thanksgiving and has had 4 showers since. Whew. At 4:10 p.m., authorities in North Dakota say they have been negotiating with the last people left in an encampment set up to protest the Dakota Access Pipeline over how to carry out ceremonial arrests. The Army Corps of Engineers had set a 2 p.m. deadline to close the camp near a Missouri River reservoir after it was the center of pipeline protests for months. Highway Patrol Lieutenant Tom Iverson says the authorities didn't plan to negotiate after 4 p.m., but he says authorities aren't necessarily going to go in after that time to make arrests. Most of the protesters walked out of camp early Wednesday, but those remaining put barbed wire across the camp entrance. At 4:20 p.m., police are arriving at North Dakota, try this again. Police are arresting North Dakota pipeline protesters who failed to meet the deadline to clear a camp on federal land in North Dakota. The Army Corps of Engineers ordered all protesters to leave by 2 p.m. Wednesday, citing concerns of flooding. About 150 people met that demand at about 1 p.m. when they marched out of camp. Hundreds of law enforcement officers from several states were on hand to handle any arrests. Some protesters set fire to wooden structures Wednesday morning as part of a ceremony of leaving. The pipeline will carry North Dakota oil through the Dakotas and Iowa to a shipping point in Illinois. Opponents say it threatens the environment and Native American sacred sites. Dallas-based developer Energy Transfer Partners disputes those claims. At 5:30 p.m., law enforcement officials say 9 people have been arrested in a confrontation outside the Dakota Access Pipeline protest camp, but police plan no further action Wednesday against against about 50 people still remaining at the site. North Dakota Highway Patrol Lieutenant Tom Iverson says the protesters taken into custody were among a group of as many as 75 people who began taunting officers. Iverson says they were arrested for not obeying law enforcement commands. Iverson says one man complained of hip pain resulting from the arrest. The extent of his injury is not known. The other people in the group left the area following the arrest. Most of the campers marched out of the camp before the departure deadline set by the Army Corps of Engineers. At 6 p.m., authorities in North Dakota say Dakota Access Pipeline protesters set about 20 fires on the day of their long-standing camp was scheduled for closure. They say that at least 2 explosions resulted. A 7-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl were taken by ambulance to a Bismarck hospital to be treated for burns. Police say they arrested about 10 people in a confrontation outside the camp. They earlier said 9 people were arrested. Officers did not move into the camp to make the arrest despite a 2 p.m. deadline that had been set to close the camp at potential spring flooding. Many other protesters left the camp voluntarily earlier in the day. Officials had arranged buses to take them to a travel assistance center in Bismarck, but they say only 4 people accepted that offer. And that's what that article has. The next article I have for you off of twitchy.com, and it says, hot mess. Carbon footprint from the Standing Rock protest just got a lot bigger. And there is video and photos and stuff in this if you want to pull it up to take a look at it. In North Dakota, the deadline for Standing Rock protesters to leave their No Dakota Access Pipeline protest camps is today, and many are still there. And this, of course, was for yesterday, the 22nd. And there's some videos and some tweets and stuff here if you want to pull it up to see it. It says, we've told you in recent days and weeks about the trash that's been left behind as a result of the environmentalists who were about a clean environment. Today, the carbon footprint got deeper and wider, and it's full-blown hot mess, literally. And it shows pictures of the teepees burning at the camp and some tweets about it. Scrolling on down, yeah, that it's just a lot of tweets and a lot of pictures and things of what's going on there. One of the things, though, that they failed to mention in either of these articles was that a lot of these encampments that were at this, well, at Standing Rock, at this camp, were ones that had been abandoned by people that couldn't take the cold in the blizzard, and others by people who had been arrested and are still sitting in jail. And so they're not there to clean up their camp. And then a lot of the mess was made because of the blizzard, and the fact that they weren't expecting that many people to actually show up, so they weren't prepared. Then there was a lot of tents and supplies and things that came in and were just dropped off in the middle of a blizzard. And that stuff wasn't taken care of properly because of people being arrested and people leaving because of the blizzard. And so it just kind of, that made a big mess. So yeah, this whole thing just kind of got totally out of hand. I don't think anybody expected it to get as large as it got and as quick as it got, and the weather to turn as bad as it did. There's a whole lot of things that contributed to this. But that's all I have for you in this episode. We'll have more episodes to follow. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that. That way you'll stay informed. See you in the next one.